where we remember those who have died in world wars. But we also remember those who have died subsequently in the many trouble spots around the world. We enjoy a modicum of peace in this country, but it was bought at such a terrible price that we should never take for granted the peace and security that we have. I'd like to invite everyone, if you are able, to stand as we commence our act of remembrance. A roll call of those who died in the First and Second World Wars, who are commemorated on the War Memorial here in Bootle. James, R.F. Atkinson, W. Close, A. Eccles, T.G. Fell, A. Grice, J. High, J. Irving, G.B. Irving, P.B. James, G.K. James, T. Johnson, N.W. Kitchen, B. Shankly, I. Singleton, J. Walker, G.D. Winfield, M. Darrell, H.W. Lacey, H. McClellan, G. All these people died that we might have our peace. And they shall not grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them. Bible reading this morning. I'm reading from the Gospel according to St. John, beginning at the 10th verse. You are Israel's teacher, said Jesus, and do you not understand these things? I tell you the truth. We speak of what we know, and we testify to what we have seen. But still you people do not accept our testimony. I have spoken to you of earthly things, and you do not believe. How then will you believe if I speak of heavenly things? No one has ever gone into heaven except the one who came down from heaven, the Son of Man. Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the desert, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes in him may have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but men love darkness instead of light, because their deeds were evil. And a quick look at 1 John chapter 3. Beginning at verse 11, which is on page 865 of the Pew Bibles. 1 John 3, beginning at verse 11. This is the message you heard from the beginning. We should love one another. Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, my brothers, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed from death to life, because we love our brothers. Anyone who does not love remains in death. Anyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life in him. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need, but has no pity on him, how can the love of God be in him? Dear children, let us not love with words of tongue, but with actions and in truth. This then is how we know that we belong to the truth, and how we set our hearts at rest in his presence, wherever our hearts condemn us. For God is greater than our hearts, and he knows everything. You know, I sat at the computer for an absolute age, trying to get started into what I should be saying as a mark of remembrance to those who have died. And today we remember those who have died in a war, and particularly those members of our armed forces who have died in the service of our own nation. Recent history and the news that enters our homes every day from Gaza, Ukraine, and numerous other places reminds us constantly of the evils and suffering associated with war. And this causes many of us to feel ambivalent about Remembrance Sunday. By remembering our war dead, we do somehow justify or even celebrate something we know to be a source of pain, suffering, and horror for countless people. In war, we ask our service personnel to be willing to sacrifice their health and sometimes their lives for our sake. We also expect them to do and to experience things that most of us would prefer not even to think about. War is an evil, a horror, a blight on human experience. But on this Remembrance Sunday, I was thinking about my grandfather. Who came home. And as the last post sounded, I say a private and silent thank you to him. But war doesn't just kill the families that are left behind. Do we ever think about those who are left? Could we say a thank you on this Remembrance Sunday for the horrors that they have been through? What can we do to reduce the scourge of war in our time? What, in the midst of so much suffering, can we see that brings us hope and the signs of God's kingdom of peace and justice? How can we help those shoots of hope to grow stronger? Have you ever played that game where you try to remember objects on a tree? My mother used to make me play that game because I didn't have a very good memory as a child. She'd put objects on the tray and cover them with a tea towel. Then she'd turn the tray round and round and round until I didn't know which way it was going to go. Then she'd put the tea towel off and say, "You've got 5 seconds." I always got it wrong. Nothing much has changed then, has it? But that game brought fun and laughter to those who were playing it. This is remembering mentally and then emotionally, placing yourself back into a moment. Remembering thoughts, feelings, smells, and relationships. The difference between memory and remembering. One is simple factual recall. The other forms us as human beings. I wonder what we will remember this time next year. It is 10 months today since Cara died, and I remember. She didn't die in a war, but she died as a soldier of Christ. She fought her battles, and she won most of them, except that last one, where she cried out in a strong voice, "I'm coming!" Possibly an angel was standing in her room, holding his hands out to her. Any loss of life is tragic. And in war, we see tragedy multiplied, time upon time. The loss of life in the Great War was dramatic, traumatic, and affected communities throughout the country, even here in Bootle. Many didn't talk about it for years, but collectively, the nation needed to remember. The trauma and loss of life were so significant that remembering became vital. Not simply a list of battles fought, but a remembering of people, of lives, of relationships, the importance of lost individuals as members of the community. Remembering an individual within a collective remembering of millions. Because those who died had value. They had an innate worth. For all it is the overwhelming numbers we recall in history books, grief was for the individual. So why do we still fall silent? In 2014, I saw on the television the sea of poppies at the Tower of London. You could eavesdrop on some of the crowd's conversations. Many were remembering a specific family member, a family member of whom we have no memory. And yet remembering was still important. 100 years later, a great niece or a great grandson was there and was moved to tears. A treasured moment, not because of memory, but because that individual mattered within their family story. It is through remembering that generations and their stories interweave and matter. Sadly, this war, to end all wars, did not end conflicts. So we also remember many who have died in conflict since. Generations past, and indeed present, whose stories of war and its impact are remembered. When we are in despair, we can feel that God has forgotten us, that we have been abandoned. Even Jesus on the cross shouted out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This heartfelt cry of the deep human fear of being forgotten certainly found an echo in the trenches of the First World War. And for many who have known armed conflict, Isaiah speaks into this space. Can a mother forget the babe at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. That's from Isaiah chapter 49, verses 15 to 16. In the middle of desolation, forsakenness, the isolation of being forgotten, it is remembering and being remembered which gives us back our humanity, evidenced on the engraved palms of God. Remembering is a human action that helps us to feel valued. God tells us that remembering is even more a divine action that gives value to humanity. Today is our opportunity to remember and grieve personally and collectively, giving back our humanity in the world, in the worst of circumstances. God tells us that we matter more to Him than a baby does to its mother. That remembering us is a divine action and gives value to humanity. That He is prepared to sacrifice Himself for us. Today we remember those who have also followed that command, that greater love hath no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends. We, their friends, will remember them and their innate worth as human beings, both to us and to God. But what of the present circumstances? Are we facing a world war? Who knows? There is certainly the possibility of one erupting with the actions of Russia invading the Ukraine, of the constant picking on Israel of the neighboring countries, and Israel's patience finally erupting in a devastating war. Yes, all of these situations could escalate. We could face ourselves being in a new war. But we are told by God not to worry. Jesus said, there will be wars and rumors of wars. But take heed, I have overcome the world.